The Dividing Line by Donna Goddard. Chapter 1. Nenny's Nest. Nenny wasn't an ordinary grandmother. I suppose many children think that their grandparents are not ordinary people, but Nenny did have certain peculiar things about her. For one thing, she danced. Not so extraordinary, you might say, but Nenny was rather, holy, and holy people don't dance, do they? The sort of dancing that Nenny did wasn't at all holy. Her wardrobe, which had lots of white, spiritual-looking clothes, also had very sparkly, twirly ones. It could not have been more different than what Nenny seemed like. Sometimes Nenny said that that's why she did it. There was something else strange about Nenny, much stranger than dancing. She knew things and saw things that other people didn't know or see. However, you must decide that for yourself. Oh, and I almost forgot to tell you, she lived in a nest. Well, that's what Molly called it. Molly was her granddaughter. She was 10 years old. 10 is the age when you are much more grown up inside than your parents think you are. They still see you as cute, at least when you are being decent. A little wearisome perhaps, but they generally see you as still quite innocent. You are not. By 10, you know many things. You know anger, hatred, jealousy, revenge, pettiness, and fear. You sometimes even choose these things quite deliberately. All going well, you also know calmness, love, kindness, fairness, forgiveness, and courage. You may not always choose them, but you could if you wanted to because you know what they are, and that's the point. You know much more at 10 than your family realises. Generally, it suits well enough to keep adults in the dark, even though you may have occasional outbursts of indignation at their disrespect for your maturity. Usually, however, you can get away with more when no one is looking at you as a grown-up. Molly lived in the country. It was always fun to drive the few hours to Nenny's nest in the city. Nenny didn't always live in a nest. For a while, she lived in a very old cottage with a lovely garden full of roses, daffodils, and bright little flowers with happy faces. I can't tell you the names of the little flowers because there were too many of them to remember. Then Nenny moved to a modern unit, which she said was the most climate-controlled place she had ever known. Molly wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. After that, she moved to the nest. Molly started calling it Nenny's Nest because not long after moving into her 10th floor apartment, Nenny said that it bothered her not to live on the ground. "It's ungrounding," said Nenny. Molly didn't know what that meant. "It's like living on a cliff or at the top of a tall tree," said Nenny. When Nenny first moved there, she told Molly's uncle that she could feel the building swaying in the wind. The uncle laughed and said, "Are you sure? I work in tall buildings, much taller than 10 stories, and no one ever complains of feeling the building moving. If they could feel it, I'm sure they would complain." Nenny said that she was sure, and because Nenny's grown-up children were used to her feeling strange things and seeing even odder things, the uncle believed her and said she must be a building whisperer. A little while later, Nenny said that she was mistaken and that the building wasn't moving at all. As she was unused to living so high, it had set off a dizzy spell, and that is how she came to feel that the building was moving. Molly noticed that this turnaround in information seemed to not have the slightest impact on the uncle believing that Nenny could feel things that other people couldn't. Going back to the matter of the nest, Nenny told Molly, "I may miss living on the earth, but living in the sky does have its advantages. The sky is important too." She said the last bit in a way that made Molly think that she didn't want either the sky or the earth to feel less than the favourite. "While I am here," said Nenny, "I will make the most of it. Up in the sky I can talk to the sun and the moon. I can see the clouds go dancing by. And as for those sneaky storms that like to surprise attack and wash everything clean, I'll have my eye on them." "What happens if you aren't grounded?" asked Molly. "I'm not sure," said Nenny. It surprised Molly whenever Nenny said that she didn't know something because she seemed to know a lot. Anyway, she didn't seem worried about it, so neither was Molly. Although Nenny lived in a cottage and then a unit and now a nest, there was one thing that she didn't and wouldn't change: her suburb. That's because the dividing lines were there, and if you knew about the dividing lines, you would never move away from them.